Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 24th of July. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by using the Alaska Weather Information Line. That's 1-800-472-0391. Find us online. Your official weather source is at weather.gov/Alaska. Once you click on that page, you'll be taken to either the Anchorage, Fairbanks, or Juneau National Weather Service office. We also have links for your aviation needs. On the left side there, you'll find the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. And of course, you'll be able to see information about your latest earthquakes, if there are any, from the National Tsunami Warning Center as they pertain to Alaska. You'll also find information about your area rivers from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. And if you can't find what you're looking for, please let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov is the easy way to find me, and I'm happy to help answer your questions anytime I can. Let's take a look at what's going on across the region. We've had some drier weather as of late, and pretty warm weather as well. Record high temperatures earlier this week. As a result of that, the dry kind of kindling type conditions are found all the way from the Deltana and Tanana Flats region through the eastern Alaska Range and into the Copper River Basin. This is where we have red flag warnings. Now, that sounds a little scary, but what it really means is fire danger is pretty high. And because of that, this is an alert to area fire managers and fire service groups that fire danger has reached that critical point where we either have very low humidity, wind, or wind and low humidity, and maybe the chance for some drier lightning or thunderstorm activity. So all those things combined, or at least in part, mean fire danger is pretty high in this region. And if you are camping or planning to do some camping, and while you're out there fishing, of course, make sure you're being extra careful with fire and obey any burn bans that are out there. If you have any questions about that, check with the campground manager or the area superintendent or maybe somebody that's official in the village and find out if burning is okay for your community before you light that match and perhaps endanger everyone else in the region. So again, high fire danger in those areas. A red flag warning is what that's called, and that'll go through the rest of today and probably into tomorrow in some cases. Here's the fire map. As of this afternoon, the 24th, you can see that there are some extreme areas across the upper Yukon, all the way up to about just south of the Brooks Range while the fire danger starts to creep up, into the Tanana Valley, all the way along the upper Tanana Valley to the Alcan border, and then across the Copper River Valley itself there. And also some drier conditions up around the northern end of southeast, around Haines and Skagway too. Probably not into the extreme level there, and conditions should be improving across northern parts of southeast in short order. However, conditions are dry enough to make the map. So what does that tell you? Again, be careful with fire no matter where you are. Anytime you want to take a look at a map similar to this, head to fire.ak.blm.gov. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture now. This is an actual snapshot of the clouds as we see them from space, and you can see that spin and spiraling structure that's located just to the south of Unalaska and Sand Point. That area of low pressure has been bringing in a very broad region of wet weather to the Gulf of Alaska. The trick is, though, that for the last several days, a lot of this has really been focused on the central and western parts of the Gulf, and now it's creeping eastward. As that happens, we're going to start to see some more low clouds and stratus work their way in very close to the outer coast of southeast, and maybe nudge in a little bit of drizzle as we get into late tonight and early tomorrow. You'll also start to see a chance for the weather to change across northern parts of southeast as we get into Wednesday afternoon and probably on Thursday. So the really nice weather that you've had in southeast, unfortunately, is starting to come to an end. You can also see some of the rain across southwestern Alaska. A lot of cloud cover there. Here's the infrared satellite picture now. This shows us a little more broader view, and the really bright white tops here are areas of convection, the tops of those really cold clouds as they bubble up from the surface all the way up to the really high altitudes that are allowing shower and thunderstorm activity to form. And in that case, of course, there's some lightning, so we're going to watch for perhaps the lightning strikes here out across the northern and central Yukon and also across the northern sections of Alaska. And of course, fire managers are watching that very carefully as well. Up north, you can see clouds that are making their way into the Chukchi Coast. That's associated with a frontal boundary dropping south and east. And a look out across the Bering, you can see more of a northerly flow here. High pressure is in charge of the Bering. It's not doing such a great job, but it is locking in the low stratus in the clouds and keeping a band of rainfall pretty much over the central chain. Here's how we see that when we put the fronts on, and low pressure is sitting up across the Arctic Sea and the Arctic Ocean with a frontal boundary across the north and another round of cold trying to work in. Ahead of that and behind it, we have areas of fog. Showers and thunderstorms are firing up across the central and northern sections of the interior. Most of that is fairly widespread at this point, or not too widespread, I should say, but we expect that to increase in coverage as we go through the evening. Areas of light rain across Bristol Bay. High pressure is trying to hold on to Prince William Sound. It's falling apart, though, and low pressure will be taking charge as you see the rest of the maps here tonight. You can see that south and easterly flow working that wet weather into parts of south central Prince William Sound most notably, but also the western Alaska Range all the way down through Bristol Bay, and at times through tonight, some areas of rainfall around Kodiak Island down toward Fognak and south and west toward Sandpoint. We expect that to pick up a little bit more, so watch for maybe some occasionally areas of heavier rainfall. High pressure sitting just west of St. Matthew to about St. Paul and St. George. It's about 1,022 millibars. Just to the west of that is a dying boundary with some areas of light rain and drizzle, probably more fog than anything else. You can see that doesn't really move very much on Wednesday, and that area of its controls kind of shrinking in coverage. That's allowing colder air to drop southward into the Brooks Range, and with that comes a chance for some fog, areas of light rain and drizzle, and a really careful eye will notice that pink shade up here around Kaktovik and the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. There might be just enough cold air for a little bit of rain and snow to mix. It wouldn't be impossible to rule that out. And down to the south and west, though, it's all rain, a 1,011 millibar low pressure system across the middle Yukon Valley. On the south side of this, you can see that broad southerly flow that's bringing rainfall into the northern and western Gulf Coast. Southeast right now still looking generally dry, but you can see it is working into northern parts of southeast here from Haines to Skagway out toward Gustavus and southward. Probably creeping in on places like Wrangell and Petersburg as we go, but maybe not down toward Ketchikan and Annette just yet. Here's Thursday, and low pressure is a little more organized across the western Gulf by this point. You can see the rainfall's peeled back out just to northern southeast as of Thursday afternoon. High pressure is trying to take charge again at just shy of 1,030 millibars. The west and southwestern parts of Alaska will be considerably more unsettled than what we'll see in southeast, but the pattern is trying to change just a little bit. Look for widely scattered areas of rain and thunder all the way across the southern faces of the Brooks Range into the upper Koyukuk, into the west and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Showers most likely across the North Slope, and still unsettled and wet and super cloudy across the Bering. Areas of rain stretch all the way from Kiska toward Adak and Atka, and then northward toward the Gulf of Anadyr. Let's take a look at your temperatures here. It is going to be mild as we start up your Wednesday morning. Some cases in the middle and upper parts of the interior, we're looking at lows that are still in the mid to upper 60s to start your Thursday morning. The North Slope will likely start out in the 30s and 40s. Places like Wainwright may just be shy of 40 degrees. Southeast, mid to upper 50s to start. South Central and Prince William Sound, upper 40s to mid 50s. Southwest and Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, looking at temperatures in the lower 50s in the morning. Places like Nunivak Island and Macoriac, about 52. While St. Lawrence Island and Gambell could be closer to the 40s. Nome near 50 degrees, and the Aleutians 40s and 50s for you. High temperatures in the afternoon in the interior once again skyrocket into the upper 70s to lower 80s. For Yukon, about 84. The North Slope, 40s and 50s. In fact, Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse could be pushing 60 degrees again on Wednesday. Upper 60s and lower 70s for Minnie and Southeast. South Central in the mid to upper 60s. Southwest, 60s and 70s for you. Thursday morning is cooler, and that's, again, that colder air dropping south and east back into the 30s for Utqiagvik, Vero, and Wainwright. Prudhoe Bay, Kaktovik near freezing. South Central in the 40s and 50s. Kodiak 51. Dutch Harbor and Unalaska 48. Southeast, you're looking at morning lows on Thursday back in the mid to upper 50s. Nome about 49. Shishmaref and Kotzebue in the 40s and 50s. By Thursday, we expect to see temperatures only in the 40s for the North Slope. As far as the upper interior goes, upper 70s to about 80 degrees. Northway, Eagle, still some of the warmer spots, as well as Fairbanks, North Pole, and Tanana. You're looking at temps in the 50s and 60s for Southwest. Nome closer to 60 degrees on Thursday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On the flying weather now, North Slope conditions will be generally VFR east of Barrow and Atkasuk. Most of the interior, south and western Alaska, and really a large chunk of southeast will present with VFR conditions in the morning, but look for widespread IFR across the Gulf through Kodiak Island, Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula, and really most of the Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, and the Bering Strait, as well as the Chukchi coast. In the afternoon, we'll watch for convection to fire up all the way across the Yukon Valley, from the Delta up through Eagle up toward Arctic Village, and probably across some parts of the western Alaska Range too. The Beaufort Seacoast is going to fill in. Look for changes there up to MVFR, maybe as far along as IFR conditions right along the coast. IFR continues across the Bering Sea and most of the Gulf, with MVFR creeping in just a little bit into Stevens Passage, cross sounds southward toward Clarence Strait and along the outer southeastern coast. For Thursday morning, more parts of south and western Alaska will start off with at least some marginal visibility restrictions there. Look for IFR across the western Alaska Range, most of the north and eastern Gulf. Hit and miss MVFR across the inside passages all the way up to Haines and Skagway, so watch for that. MVFR continues across the north slope, but the IFR pulls back a little bit further to the north, so at least you'll have some of that and maybe a fighting chance Thursday morning. St. Lawrence Island down through the Pribilofs, the central and eastern chain, and parts of the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Once again, looking at IFR, you'll see that pull back just a little bit over Bristol Bay for Thursday afternoon, leaving some VFR potential there. MVFR, though, inland, and for most areas along the coast. Look for MVFR to hover across the outer coast of southeast, work its way into Prince William Sound, and then return to IFR conditions there by the afternoon and into the Barren Islands and up Cook Inlet there. Look for MVFR across parts of the Cook Inlet region, generally south of Kenai and into Homer. And convection, once again, will be an issue across the upper Yukon and parts of western Alaska, with the north slope seeing some hit and miss MVFR. Most areas, though, look to be VFR conditions for the afternoon. Here's your past conditions in detail there for your Wednesday. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions with a chance for showers and storms maybe around the Adigan Pass side. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass looking for marginal conditions through most of the day. Showers and thunderstorms will be possible as we go through. Rainy Pass expected to be VFR. Same goes for Windy Pass and Isabel Pass. All looking good there. Mentasta Pass expected to be VFR. And as we go southward, Tanita Pass, VFR conditions there. Portage Pass probably leaning over toward IFR on Wednesday. And again on Thursday, there a better chance for more widespread IFR on Thursday. And Chilkoot and White Pass, things look pretty good up north across parts of southeast. VFR expected for your Wednesday. Freezing levels indicate that warm air is pushing its way back in from the west as high pressure is building in across the North Pacific and the western Bering. But we have a low in the western Gulf, and that is dragging those freezing levels down to about 8,000 feet and below. There's still some residual heat across the central and eastern Gulf, levels there anywhere from 10 to 12,000 feet. Up north, levels across the north slope about 8 to 10,000 feet for your Wednesday morning. Icing potential is way high up there, though, so most of you probably won't be too concerned with this. Above 10,000 feet across southeast, south central, and southwestern Alaska into Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island, and across the north slope above 10,000 feet. Also another wave developing across the western Bering, that above 10,000 feet as well. Here's the jet stream. No surprise, a low in the western Gulf and the North Pacific. You can see wind speeds there around 50 to 65 knots. Another push of stronger winds coming in across the Kamchatka Peninsula there around 80 knots. And then a westerly jet coming across the north slope between 80 and 90 knots with high pressure across the eastern Gulf, sending in a south and westerly flow to the Pacific Northwest, 50 to 90 knots there on that stream. Closer to home, low pressure sitting south of Sand Point, a broad southerly flow over the Gulf and southeast. You can see wind speeds there between 20 and 40 knots. An easterly flow coming across Bristol Bay and southwestern Alaska, 15 to 30 knots there. And broad westerlies coming across the north slope. Some of the strongest winds are just offshore, though. Right now it looks like most areas closer to Utqiagvik, down toward Wainwright, Point Hope, Point Lay, about 10 to 15 knots for you. The interior light winds. Southerlies across the western chain, about 20 to 40 knots. Down below at 3,000 feet. Low pressures in pretty much the same place. We have an easterly flow across the southern third of Alaska, westerlies across the northern third. About 10 knots or so, still pretty light. They speed up around Kaktovik. Ridge of high pressure still in place across southeast with light winds for you, and northerlies across the central and western chain. What about turbulence? Well, there is some turbulence developing there below 4,000 feet from Kiska out toward Attu. Look for some considerable moderate there, and developing areas of turbulence around Prince William Sound through the Cook Inlet region as we go into tomorrow. Most of that's just isolated moderate. Lake Iliamna and west toward the southwestern Capes and Bristol Bay, and of course across the north slope. We'll be watching for convection throughout the interior as well for your Wednesday.
It's a complicated project, but a simple life. You can study whales all over the world, you can study harbor seals all over the world, but you cannot study them in silence all over the world. So we really need this sort of piece of wilderness, this untrammeled wilderness, as they say, in order to answer some of these questions.
So we've been monitoring underwater sound here in Glacier Bay since May of 2000. And the reason why we're doing that is to understand what the park is like from the perspective of a marine mammal, because marine mammals are very dependent on the natural sound environment.
If you sort of bring it back to humans, humans respond to noise in very stereotypical ways, and other mammals do the same thing. So, if you go to a concert with your buddy and the music's really loud, you're going to talk at a higher pitch, you're going to talk louder, and you might have to repeat yourself. And marine mammals do the same thing if it gets noisy. So we're seeing, just which of those three that they actually do. We're here on Strawberry Island for the entire summer.
We sample 8 to 12 hours a day. There'll be 2 people who are on our beach station doing scans, marking each whale in the area, 2 people who are doing focal follows from our tower, which is a temporary tower that we have set up here on Strawberry Island. And then we have 2 people who are in the kayak who are doing fine scale acoustic sampling for harbor seals. Got a harbor seal at 23 meters.
Got it? What's her bearing?
Bearing is 5822121.
Being able to pair what an animal is saying with where the animal is saying it is an amazing data set. It's a hard data set to get. It takes a lot of work, but it can answer so many questions.
So our cruise ship right here in the background is right on time today. We have a blissful hour and a half before the cruise ship gets here where we can watch our whales in silence. And then our ship comes in, bringing with it the noise that it brings, and we watch our whales while the ship's here to see whether or not their behavior is changing. And then it's going to go up bay and bring passengers to go see the glaciers, and we are going to get that blissful quiet again to see whether or not our whales are going back to that natural behavior.
This is the computer that runs our underwater acoustic monitoring, and there's a 5-mile cable from my office that leads out to a hydrophone that's out recording live sounds in Glacier Bay. And if I turn this up a little bit louder for the moment, that's the sound of a male harbor seal roaring because it's the mating season.
Bartlett Cove, Strawberry Island. Building a good field team and building some good camaraderie is really important. We have sort of these daily routines of things that we do together. So there's a schedule that we check every morning, who's gonna cook lunch that day, who's gonna cook dinner. And then every day we take a group photo. And then every day we do a daily check-in. We talk about what worked that day, what didn't work that day, and what we learned either from the island or from each other over the course of the day. Surface 900600.
Last night, there were anywhere from 8 to 10 individuals right along the kelp bed off the point. And we were trying to figure out exactly what they were doing. So as acousticians, Michelle and I got a hydrophone.
That seemed like the right thing to do.
Put the hydrophone in the water to see what was going on. Well, we dropped the hydrophone and it was so quiet. There was not a single roar.
Nothing. We heard
It was
nothing.
just so unusual.
One of the things we did observe yesterday was 2 large bull killer whales who had come into the area that we learned today were transient killer whales. They do come into this area to hunt harbor seals. This is a pupping ground. That's what they come in for.
Yep.
We cannot in any way, shape, or form definitively link the presence of mammal-eating killer whales with the silence of harbor seals.
No, but it is quite interesting that they happened at the exact same time. It's always an adventure on Strawberry Island. You never know what the day's gonna bring.
This morning at 5:15 in the morning, the area was just boiling with whales. I had one 15-minute scan this morning where I was literally hopping back and forth on either side of the theodolite, calling out numbers to try and get all the whales as quickly as possible. And then 15 minutes later, we couldn't find them. Aside from getting to be outside all the time, my favorite part of doing my PhD is getting to work with Leanna.
It goes both ways.
It helps when you put 2 minds that think differently onto the same problem.
Global ocean noise is a real problem, and there are areas of the ocean that have underwater sound from vessels so often that you could almost consider it an urban environment. Glacier Bay is a very remote area, and it was set aside as a national park in part to do scientific research. And we're privileged to be able to use it as a natural laboratory where we can better understand the impacts of underwater noise.
There are some places that act like characters in your life, and I think that a lot of Alaskans can resonate with the fact that living here is like having another family member. It's like having somebody really, really important who's sort of nudging you to be a little uncomfortable all the time and to stretch yourself all the time because it's worth it. I've lived here for almost 10 years. I've made Alaska my home, and so I'm an Alaskan by choice.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Back to your sea ice edge now. A high concentration of ice is found from Kaktovik to just north of Utqiagvik and Barrow. This higher concentration is where the pack ice is. Of course, the blue shaded areas is the marginal ice zone. That could be anywhere from 80% or lower. And we're probably not going to see this edge change a whole lot further north in the next several weeks. It will be close to the coast, but chances are this may be just enough room for you to sneak through with your ship or your barge. Of course, you want to consult the very latest sea ice information when you do that, and the best place to go is weather.gov/anchorage/ice. This will give you the sea ice concentrations in much finer detail that you can zoom in and plot your course with. You can also check on the concentrations and the thickness, which is just as important as the concentration map that you see here. Check on sea surface temperatures, which you can find for the entire state of Alaska. And of course, you can get the 5-day outlook and the sea ice seasonal outlook there, all of which will help you plan your route there and be extra safe across the Beaufort and the Chukchi seas. Let's take a look at the sea forecast now for parts of southeast. Light winds will stay the rule as we get into southeast, 10 to 15 knots or so, generally northwesterlies inside of the Lynn Canal, and you'll see that down into the Clarence Strait as well. 3-foot seas on the inside at the most. Across the outer coast, 10 to 15 knots. You'll see that picking up to about 20 to 25 across the northern Gulf. Seas there about 5 to 7 feet. A little bit further south of Sitka, only 5 feet expected outside of the Clarence Strait. Not a whole lot of change there on Thursday. Winds diminish in some areas on the inside, 15 to 20 knots, generally from the north and west. Lynn Canal winds still looking to come in from the south, and the outer coast, 15 to 20 knots, generally 5 to 6 foot seasonal areas, and light winds across the northern Gulf should be expected as we go into Thursday. Across south central, winds are going to be a little bit stronger inside of Prince William Sound, northwesterly sweeping in at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Stronger easterlies coming in from the 25 to about 30 knot range or so. 6 to 7 foot seas expected into the Barrens. And look for stronger winds coming down from Cook Inlet. 20 to 25 as you get south of Kenai. That comes up even more to 25, even 30 knots with 7 to 8 foot seas there. Winds diminish in most areas on Thursday. Still looking at about 10 to 20 knots across Cook Inlet. South and easterly winds into the Barrens. Winds diminish inside of Prince William Sound if you're headed out. 15 knots and 3 foot seas there. 5 to 6 foot seas across the northern Gulf and outside of Resurrection Bay. For Bristol Bay, look for northeasterlies there, and you'll see about 15 to 20 knot winds down the Bering Sea coast. 4-foot seas expected across the North Pacific. You'll see 5, maybe even 6-foot seas, but notice the winds really come up sharply inside of Shelikof Strait. Northeasterlies there will be blowing around 30 knots with an 11-foot sea thanks to that persistent northeasterly fetch coming across the northern part of the Gulf. As we get into Thursday, the wind changes direction and so do the seas. You'll look for a southeasterly flow coming off of Kodiak Island over Shelikof Strait. Seas drop to 3 feet. Look for 5 to even 6 foot seas across the northern Gulf in the west and 3 to 4 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast and inside of Bristol Bay, expecting only a southeasterly flow around 15 knots for your Thursday. For the Aleutians, north and westerly winds all the way from Adak and Atka to Nikolsky and Unalaska, 15 to 20 knots in most areas, 5 to 6 foot seas at the top. Looking for westerlies across the western chain from Kiska out toward Attu, 20 knots and 6 to 7 foot seas. As we get into Thursday, expect winds to hold pretty much where they are, 15 knots in most areas. A few places between Atka and Nikolsky could come up to 20. Look for 4 to 5 foot seas on Thursday there in the west. A broad westerly flow comes up to 20 to 25 knots, 5 to 10 foot seas there Still not looking for any gales just yet. Out across the west, winds will be a little more variable, especially north of Nunivak Island, 10 to 20 knot winds. With 2 to 3 foot seas inside of Norton Sound, 4 to 5 foot seas south of St. Matthew to St. Paul and St. George, looking for about 15 to 20 knot winds there. A little bit more of a wind out of the south and east for St. Matthew and into the Kuskokwim Delta, 15 to 20 with 3 to 6 foot seas, but we're still going to get a general northerly flow coming down the east side of the ridge of high pressure across western Alaska. So 10 knot winds will continue inside of Norton Sound. Northerlies at 15 knots around St. Paul and St. George, looking for 4 to about 5 foot seas in that area, and 3 to 4 foot seas north of Nunivak Island and St. Matthew. As we get to the north slope, westerlies will be a little stronger, trailing the front as that moves ashore. We're looking for ice again, so no sea forecast across the Beaufort Sea right now. 3 to 4 foot seas in most areas in the Chukchi, north of Point Lay to Wainwright, expecting about 5 foot seas with a westerly onshore flow. Not strong enough yet to really get too much attention. Look for 15 to 20 knots across the north, and then southerlies trying to push in from the Bering Strait, 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas there, and we'll still keep that onshore flow there from Cape Lisburn to about Barrow and Utqiagvik as we get toward your Thursday afternoon. Recapping tonight's weather, precipitation, rainfall mainly across southwest and south central. Not looking for as much around Cook Inlet, but places that are normally wet are going to be soggy again. Prince William Sound down toward Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, all around that 1,009 millibar low. High pressure sitting across southeast, still trying to hold back some of the clouds, but if you're across the outer coast late tonight and tomorrow, you'll probably see the clouds creeping in. Looks like they'll hover pretty close to the outer coast right now, but if they get a little bit closer to where you are, it will be generally low stratus and probably more drizzle than any heavier rainfall. Watch for some of the wetter areas around Haines and Skagway out toward Gustavus and maybe as far south as Juneau. For the interior tomorrow afternoon, showers and thunderstorms will be a little more widespread than what we've seen today. Colder air is dropping southward. There might even be a hint of snow mixed in with rain around Kaktovik. High pressure is holding out west. As we get into your Thursday, even wider spreading of shower and thunderstorm activity across the north and western interior and more rain in south central.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.